afternoon. It's Saturday the 24th of June 2017, and my name is Jared or Peter or Boniface. I am a knitter, crocheter, sewer and weaver. I live in Abingdon in Oxfordshire in the south of England, about 7 miles south of the city of Oxford. Thank you for joining me today. It's very nice to be able to spend some time again chatting about all things fibre and yarn related. It's been a awful week in terms of the weather. It's far too hot. We've had temperatures in excess of 34 degrees for several days down here, which hasn't been too bad at work for me because I have air conditioning in my office and it has been working, so I've actually had quite a pleasant time at work. But out of work, travelling to and from work on buses where the internal temperature is hitting 40 degrees, trying to sleep at night time when it's just far too warm. One of my cats, Bunty, had the right idea. She slept in the bath, but she having taken the bath, there was no room for me there, so that was quite a sensible move on her part. It's a funny thing that by Thursday, when the heat wave had broken, and the temperature had dropped down to only 24 degrees, it's ridiculous how cool 24 degrees actually felt for quite a while, which is, actually still a very warm temperature. Is very good for June in England. And the temperature is, it's mid-afternoon, it's 4 o'clock in the afternoon now, so it's cooling down a little, but it's still fairly warm. I've got the doors open. It's a slight breeze outside, but it's a fairly lovely day. I'm not feeling cold or chilly at all, and I have two cats who are sleeping at the moment. One right in front of the window and one on top of the table. So one on the desk, one on the table. They seem happy enough at the moment, rather relaxed. I don't know how they cope, to be perfectly honest, with their thick coats, although they didn't seem to really mind the weather being so hot. The only thing I did notice is that both of them, rather than sprawling out in front of the windows as they normally would do, both stayed in the bathroom, one on the lino and the other one in the bath, because obviously they were cooler places. So I think they were feeling the heat a little. But I made sure they had plenty of fresh water, and they don't seem any the worse for wear. There's been quite a lot of molting going on, I've noticed, but that's hardly surprising. So it just means that some of my items have possibly got a little bit more animal hair or fibre in them than was sold to me in the shop. On the whole, they're quite good. They don't mess around with my projects, and I keep them in the bags much of the time, but there is a lot of cat hair flying around at all times because I have two cats, and that's an inevitable part of having cats, so I'm never too surprised when I find a dark hair in the middle of something that I've been knitting or crocheting. I don't have any finished objects this week. Last week I did get an awful lot done, partly because, there we are, Toby, can you just move your tail? Thank you. There's a good boy. Yes, thank you, that's right. There's no show without Toby, is there? Okay, sorry, I'm just going to readjust the camera so that it's more... There we are. So, I don't have any finished objects, and I haven't really made a lot of progress on most of the things I've been working on, except I'm currently knitting on my sock. I've completed the toe, and I've almost completed the foot on my second sock in the pair. The first being here already, so that's going quite well. I'm just knitting in the round, magic loop knitting. Every time I open this bag, I've got one of my sachets in here. I'm just going to pull it out so you can see one of my little bags of lavender, and the scent is just so incredibly good. It's not just scenting the room and the items, the wool and the socks that are in the bag. Lavender apparently also keeps moths away, so it's got a practical purpose as well as an aesthetic purpose. And I'm using my, I think these are 3mm needles, which were in the Chinese set in the purple bag that hangs on the door of my wardrobe. So the set I got incredibly cheaply, and they're really nice needles to use. They're very smooth. There's no catch at the join between the needle and the cable. The cable is made of twisted steel. It's not plastic coated, so it feels very nice. It's all stainless steel. It's very smooth. I'm very, very pleased with this set. It really works extremely well, and they're very lightweight and pleasant to use. And even if I were doing a straight item, which I have got a straight item actually on the needles. I'll just finish that line, that row. I'll just put that there. In this bag I have an item on that's actually a shawl, the lace shawl. I've not really got much further with it, but I make it on needles and then turn. So I'm constantly turning, just as you would with two straight needles. But one of the reasons I like the interchangeables or the circular needles in the other case, in this case they're not actually interchangeable, they're permanently fixed. Whereas these I can unscrew and screw onto a different size of tip. But I find that they actually fit the profile of my hand extremely well. So if with longer needles, the needle would be coming straight up out here, and I find that because of the way I hold the needle, which is from above, rather than, I've seen some people do it from below like this, which is fine, if it works for them, that's not an issue for me, but I just find that I don't have any clunking on surfaces, and I don't catch them in my sleeve, and it's just a very comfortable way of knitting for me. So I tend not to use straight needles even for items where straight needles would be fine. In fact, that's a shawl, so at some point I would probably have had to take it off straight needles anyway, because they wouldn't be long enough, or I'd have to scrunch it all up, which I don't like to do. I'm particularly with metal needles, I always find I'm likely to drop stitches if the stitches are too bunched up together. It's very easy for them when you're taking one off that you accidentally pull two or three off at the same time. So I tend not to do that. So yeah, that's my reason for using circulars even when I don't need to. I have a work in progress which I put down somewhere, and I can't find. There it is. It's behind Toby. I'll just pop that back down. I have another work in progress, which you may remember last week I talked about, which is a crocheted cardigan. I wasn't actually going to work on this, but I was reading the instructions because I like to familiarise myself with the pattern, and I was really quite taken because I think I mentioned it's a herringbone stitch, crochet stitch. But it's not particularly visible on the picture. You get the ridges, but I don't think you really see the detail on the picture. It's quite a clever treble crochet stitch. So with a normal treble crochet, I use UK terms, so double crochet if you're used to American terms. With a normal double crochet, you put the yarn over the hook, then you put the hook through the stitch, put the yarn over the hook again and pull up a loop back through the stitch. So you've got 3 loops on the hook now, because you always start with a loop on the hook. And then you yarn over and pull through 2 of those loops, meaning you've got 2 left, and then you yarn over and pull through those last 2 loops, which means you've got 1 left, and then you do the next treble crochet. The treble crochets in here are different, quite considerably different. Because you yarn over in the normal way and put the loop through the hook through the stitch, and then yarn over and pull that loop back. But when you pulled it back through the stitch, you also pull it through the second loop on the hook, which means you still only have 2 loops on the hook. And then you effectively chain one, so you yarn over and pull through that first loop again, and then you yarn over and pull through the 2 loops. And what this does is it elongates one side of the treble crochet so that it leans. And then when you go back, it leans back the other way, and then when you go back, it leans that way, and it produces this herringbone stitch style. And it's, I think you can begin to see on here, I was just looking at it, you can, so this is, the long part is the back, these are the 2 sleeves, and then I've just started, I've not finished this row completely because I took the hook out, but in fact that's the front. So you've got, it will go over my neck like that. There'll be a button band, a collar above this, but that's basically how it will go. So you've got the front, the sleeves, and the back. I think I've mentioned before the raglan style, and this is a top-down raglan style construction. So at some point I'll break off from the sleeves, and I'm still in 2 minds as to whether to make it a sleeveless cardigan or a fully sleeved cardigan. I can make that decision much later on as I get through it. I quite like the waistcoat, what the Americans would call a vest style top, because with long sleeves, you probably have noticed on videos I'm constantly doing this anyway, because I don't like things around my wrists. I don't wear a watch, I don't have things around my wrists. So I tend to go for shorter sleeve shirts or t-shirts anyway. And when I do wear jumpers and things, I do tend to pull them up a little. So I'm in 2 minds as to which way to go on that. But I just wanted to get this going because I wanted to see what it looks like. And I have to be honest, I'm actually really quite impressed by it. I think the other thing about it is that a normal treble crochet, there's usually a gap, quite a clear gap between each post of the treble crochet. But because of the way this is constructed, using effectively a slip stitch and then a chain, it's producing a much tighter fabric. I mean, you can pull it apart and see the gaps, but in its normal state, it's actually quite relaxed, and it just produces a flat texture, which I really like this texture as well. It's really nice to touch. So I'm quite pleased with the progress on that. So I wasn't going to start on that story of my life. I'm not going to take on new projects until I've completed other parts of projects, and it never happens that way. As you know, I always end up doing things that I'm not intending to do. But I'm quite enjoying that, and it's a very... when I first started doing it, it was so odd. I wasn't quite sure, is this right? Am I doing this right? And there isn't a video that comes with this pattern, so you do have to trust that what you're doing is right. But I followed the pattern religiously, and it really is what is intended. And given the effect on the fabric, even if it were not, I probably would carry on doing that. But actually, looking at the photos, I think there's another one here which I can focus in on. You can just about see the same patterning. So it's a horizontal pattern that's produced, and I'm really quite enjoying it. So I don't know if I'll carry on doing that. I know I've got to get other things done as well, but sometimes I think with these projects, you do what interests you, and that's what keeps you motivated to keep doing it. Otherwise, part of the strength of these kind of crafts is its repetitive action, which is quite addictive and very calming. But at the same time, that monotony can become tedious rather than relaxing. So having a little bit of other things to try, particularly, I've said before, I'm a process knitter and crocheter rather than a product knitter and crocheter. Although I will get the personal use out of that project, I'm actually interested in the process by which I'm making the product rather than the product itself. The product is the happy culmination of the process, but it's the process that actually motivates me. So I'm quite relaxed about whether I carry on with that or do other things. I'm hoping to get this sock finished. It really won't take me very long to do this. I've got to do the wrap and turn heel for the short rows. I think the next time I get to the orange, the next orange repeat will be the last one before I do the heel. So it's fairly mindless stockinette knitting. I can do that while watching television, while chatting on this podcast. The only reason I'm not doing it this second is because I want to show you what else I've been doing. So I've been concerned for a while that I need to organise my craft space better. Partly because my craft space is in my bedroom. And so obviously I need a bed, and I need wardrobes and drawers to keep my clothes in. So that's all a given. And I have a desk, and I have a table, and I have a chest of drawers with a TV on top, and I have a bookcase, and I have a sofa. Now the question is, do I need the sofa? Well, I don't need it. I very often will spend quite a lot of time sitting on my office chair, which is on wheels and goes between the desk and the table, which are set basically at 90-degree angles with the window in between. And the table has my computer on it, but is also where I do a lot of cutting, because there's a big enough space in front of the computer to put one of the small cutting mat on there. And so if I'm doing small pieces, I can cut them on there. And the desk is where I tend to have the sewing machine out, or if I'm cutting larger pieces, I'll have them on the floor with the large mat I've got. But I do tend to use those two a lot, so I tend to be in my office chair quite a lot. But the advantage that the sofa gives me is, first of all, it's actually slightly more relaxing for me, but secondly, my cats can't really be with me when I'm sitting in my office chair. Whereas on the sofa, what normally happens is I'll sit down watching some TV or listening to an audio book, and I'll have Bunty on the left and Toby on the right. And they obviously feel that need to have the closeness to me, and I don't want to deprive them of that. There have been studies about cats which indicate that they prefer having time with their human companion over being fed, which, if you know how cats love being fed and will wake you up at 4 o'clock in the morning in order to be fed, and believe me, waking up with a cat's wet nose in your ear with a sound down your ear is quite an experience if you haven't had it. But most cat owners will know that at 4 o'clock in the morning or thereabouts, or 5 o'clock or whatever, a cat will be on your bed, pressing away with their feet on you, and basically wanting you to wake up to feed them. So the idea that they want your companionship more than they want their food shows the strength of the fact that they do need to have that acknowledgement. Cats have a reputation for being solitary creatures, and indeed they are for large parts of the day. They look after themselves, they like their own company. But when they want affection, they want affection. When they want your attention, it doesn't matter what you happen to be doing, they want your attention. And as most cat owners will tell you, they don't understand that when you're sitting looking at a computer screen because you're writing something or because something is happening, you're watching a video or whatever, that it doesn't mean that you're sitting there staring into space, doing nothing. Because inevitably the cat will walk across and plonk itself right in front of you. But that's part of the joy of having cats. They stop you being selfish, because they're selfish. And it's fun, and it brings you back into the real world, and so that's why I keep the sofa. In many ways, it's a luxury that I can ill afford, in the sense that it's taking up a lot of space that could be used for storage. But that, in its own way, means I have to be more creative with the available space that I have. And I perhaps haven't got it right yet. I've not been in need of proper space for very long, because I've only been doing all of this stuff since I was ill, actually a year ago now. So it's probably still only 10 or 11 months since I started crocheting in earnest. So I've not really developed the space properly, but I will insert a video here to show some of the things that I have done. So I thought before I actually filmed my podcast today, I'd film a small insert that to explain how I've been reorganising how I store things and where I keep things. So I'll just stop this recording and then turn the camera around and you'll be able to see more of what's going on. So in the corner behind the TV I have some picture hooks, and on the picture hooks I suspend my various rulers. So this is the circular ruler that I showed last week with the small cutter together, the triangle, my square, and then my rectangular ruler. And the big thing this week that I've been doing is sorting out my material stash. So I've taken it out of boxes and I've folded it up and have it stored vertically, and now I can actually see what fabric I've got. These are the larger cuts of fabric, so usually 1 metre or maybe 2 metres, some of them, and folded up so that they wrap around an A4 piece of card and then stand up quite self-contained in the corner of the room. And obviously then you can see some of my materials, my yarn stash. Then I have the Dresden plate template also hanging on a pin on the wall, and an IKEA set of tubs. These are removable tubs, and inside them I keep the yarn that I've been making the dungarees from that I showed last week, and I've got to make the hat that goes with the dungarees. And then below that I've got another hook where I suspend my knitting looms. I've got a couple of storage containers here, which contain various bits and pieces, the ribbons and batteries and pens and other such things in there. And I've got a jar of buttons on top and various bits and pieces. And then hanging on the door I've got my knitting set, and on top I've got some more yarn, and then over there I have the large cutting mat suspended. And then on that wall I have these new plastic bins, and inside the bins, I'll just get a bit closer, inside this one are just small scraps. These are quite useful as leaders, which if you're sewing small items, it can be very useful to have a leader to start the process of sewing with, because otherwise the feet underneath the dogs can actually pull too much fabric and rumple the fabric while trying to stitch. So if you're sewing small items, it's very useful to have a leading piece of fabric. So these are just odds and ends that would otherwise be thrown away, and I'll just use those as leaders and then throw them away. In here I've got non-standard scraps of fabric, so mostly triangles, little bits and pieces that don't quite fit. My other fabric storage solution, which I will discuss in the podcast, and then in the end I have my fat quarters in another bucket. These buckets cost £1 at Poundland and they're very useful, and then on top I have some more yarn stored. So that's basically it. So that's kind of a brief tour of the storage situation, and I'll record the full podcast. To mention, one other item is below my desk, which is a very nice set of drawers. Lovely Diamante sparkle, which I put in the bottom because then it's easier for me to see. Given to me this morning by a very good friend who I know will be watching, so that's where it is if you are in any way concerned. And it fits beautifully under the table. and I sit on this side with my computer above, so it's not in the way at all there, so it's actually very convenient and fits the space perfectly. And if again, in here I have bits and pieces of yarn that I'll be using for various different projects, so I've got it close to hand for when I need it. So you're back. Sorry, I just had to stop so you didn't miss anything. Makes it easier in the edit. So I've spent quite a bit of time watching videos on how other people organise their craft rooms. And there are some very good, simple ideas. And one of the things that has concerned me is that I have a big plastic tub which is in the bottom of the wardrobe, and it's perfect. It fits underneath the shirts that are hanging there, and it's out of the way and it's fantastic. Into which I simply put all of my fabric. Well, that's fine, but then it keeps it safe and dry and dust free and all the rest of it. But how do I know what's in there? How do I know how much of this I have? How do I know, or can I be bothered finding it? So I've done a number of things. The first of which is I've taken the larger cuts of fabric, anything over a fat quarter in size, so 1/2 metre up to, I think the biggest I've got is 3 metres, but most of them are around 1 metre. And I've folded them in such a way that I could wrap them around an A4 card. And I got 20 multicoloured cards from Pound Shop for £1. So I got 2 packs of those, and I've wrapped them around and been able to insert. In fact, I'll just get one and I'll show you what I mean. So there's the card inside, and I've wrapped it around, and then I folded over. The final piece actually fits into, or rather fits over like an envelope over the rest of the item, so it holds it in a very compact, neat A4 size parcel. And then, as you saw, I've got them lined up on a shelf above the TV, and I can see what I have. And I think seeing things in full view encourages you to do things with them. Hiding things away in the bottom of the wardrobe is very good from a minimalist, not that anyone could ever accuse me of being minimalist, but it's very good from a minimalist point of view in that it's all neatly put away and hidden from view. But actually being able to see them all the time can itself begin to generate ideas. Oh, I might try a video I've seen. Oh, I might try that with that fabric. That would look good. And that's what I'm hoping will happen. So that was one part of the stash sorting. The second part you'll have seen in the video as well, which was the 3 buckets. One I've got fat quarters in, which they could go anywhere, but they might as well go in there for the time being. I can see them and they're available to me. One has odd scraps of fabric, usually irregular shapes that can't be made into strips, and then one has the little offcuts, which, as I've said, I think in the video, you use as a leader for very small bits of sewing, so that the dogs have got something other than your finished work to actually grab hold of and pull through, because sometimes it can ruck up and you end up with an awful mess in your stitching. And again, that was a tip I've got from a couple of videos. And so the other thing I did, which I didn't show in the video because I'll show them here now, the pieces of fabric that are below a fat quarter size, say, unless it's, well no, it's not entirely, so very small pieces of fabric, the offcuts from here, there and everywhere, what I did was lay them out on my, as individual items, lay them out on my cutting mat, which is measured in inches, and I cut them into strips that are either 1.5 inches wide, 2.5 inches wide, 3.5 inches wide, 5 inches wide, or 7 inches wide. And the reason for that is those are the 5 main strip sizes that are used in quills. So if I've got an 8-inch piece of fabric, then I'll cut a 7-inch strip from it. Or, more, if I've got enough 7-inch I might prefer to do a 5" and a 1.5" and get 2 cuts out of it rather than, and thereby only waste half an inch because it's 6.5 instead of 6. Sorry, 7.5. Sorry, what am I talking about? It would be a 5 and a 2.5, and that would make it 7.5 instead of 7 out of the 8 inches. And so you basically take all your offcuts and you cut them down. And then I also saw in Poundland, I think these must be shower caddies. They're plastic baskets, quite decent size with handles. And this has got my small, but large enough that I might use them as the strip that they are. So these are the odd-sized ones, and I've also got 4 squares of interfacing, which I think I must have cut out from one of the project bags, because I remember I had to cut squares out of the bottom corners of each of those. And so I've got 1.5" strips of different materials, and I've got quite a few in there, just from the bits and pieces I've been doing. And one or two of them were not ideally, were horizontal widths rather than vertical widths, which means that they would be against the bias. So I cut those into 1.5" squares, which is very useful. So actually this is what I mean. So this is a horizontal strip, and that wouldn't look right or work properly on as a strip, because it needs to be vertical rather than horizontal. So these are the ones I'm cutting up into 1.5" squares. So I've got quite a lot of different fabrics that I've used so far, and just little offcuts. So that's the 1.5", and then I have 2.5" in there, and a jelly roll, which is also 2.5" strips. And the advantage of these boxes is that they do this. They nest quite happily, one on top of the other. Oops-a-daisy. And these are the 3.5" strips. And there's quite a few in there. Actually, they all go the other way up. I don't want to start getting these things wrong. Oh no, that's right, 1.5 on top, that's right. And then these are the 5" strips, but I've also put a charms pack in there, which are also 5 inch squares. So there's 5 inches, and then the 7 inches, which are folded in half, but these are 7 inch wide strips. And then the odd bits and pieces. So altogether, and then the non-linear, the triangular and circular offcuts are put over in the bucket, and it's a good way of having your scraps ready for anything that I might choose to do. So if I've got a jelly roll, but I might want to insert one of these elephant strips, for example. And why not? Or one of the cornflower strips. It might just... The scrappy projects are actually can be quite attractive. So those are the baskets. They all sit quite happily one on top of each other, and they sit in the bottom of the wardrobe. Just in the door, so all I have to do is open the door and say, oh yes, there are my... So every time I do anything now, when I make cuts from the full size fabric, if I'm making a larger project, the small offcuts I'll then cut up into the various bits and pieces and pop them in the appropriate basket. I'll probably label them at some point. I've got some marker pens, so I can put labels on here, or I might just put a sticky label on the side or something, just so I can remember. But I've actually, if you notice, they're actually colour coded, so it goes. I suppose this is aqua, sky blue, purple, red, sky blue, aqua again. There are only 4 colours in the shop, so I couldn't get 6 colours. But I just thought that was a very simple and clever idea, and I was quite happy to give it a go, and I quite enjoyed getting everything sorted out. Although Toby did try to interfere. The other night when I was doing it, I finished it off this morning, and yeah, very pleased with the way it's turned out. So this will be an ongoing thing. So every time, as I say, every time I cut up fabric now, I won't just be, what do I do with all the odds and ends. I mean, I'm quite pleased I did. My natural instinct is not to throw anything away. I'm not a hoarder, but I am of the opinion that most things will still have a further use. So I'm quite glad that instinct kicked in, and I kept hold of things even without any clear idea of why I was keeping hold of them. And as a result, I've actually got usable fabric. I'm watching an awful lot of quilting shows on YouTube and enjoying them very much. I'm still working on my Dresden Plates quilt, and I'm enjoying that very much. It's going very well. So I'm hoping that, you know, as I do more of this stuff, I'm going to get more and more inspiration to do more and more of my own things, rather than following other people's ideas. And I'm building up my own little collection of cuts of fabric that I actually find attractive and useful. So so in my big box in the bottom of the wardrobe now, all I have in there are things like the batting, and I've got some white muslin, which is useful for test cuts and that kind of thing. And I've also got some interfacing and some foam inserts for making the sturdier bags, and I've got some felt as well. I got a pack of felt. So it's actually made that a more useful storage area as well, because that's now storing the bits and pieces that I will need to complete projects, but not the bits and pieces that will actually inspire me to make a project. So I've got the inspiration in front of me now, because those are the kind of supporting casts that they're never the reason why you make projects, but they are indispensable to many projects that you make, because they give you extra functionality, whether it's to make flimsy fabric more sturdy, or whether it's to make a quilt or whatever happen to be doing, or a quilting bag, or a quilted bag, or a quilted pouch of some kind. So yeah, I'm quite pleased with the way that that's turned out. And as I say, it's a work in progress, but I'm quite pleased with the overall layout of the room at the moment, so I don't feel any huge need to change my furniture. I think the bookcase, I probably need to pull this sofa out and have a good clear out of the bookcase and set it up more as a crafting area. You can see I've got a lot of books on crafts. I don't have so many novels and things in here. I do have DVDs, but I'm watching very few DVDs now because most things are streamed, and I do watch DVDs, but not as much as I used to. And then I have my church books and things on that side as well, which are just very useful for me personally. So I think I'll probably reorganise this area next, but it's not as pressing a priority as it was to try and make some sense of where everything was in the room. And I'll put a little video in here again. I was given a very nice little drawer unit. It was unexpected, but it's very welcome, and it fits perfectly in the gap, so I'm really very pleased with that. And it just means that wool or yarn that will be used for the next projects that I have in mind is ready to go, while the projects I have currently occupy the project bags. So as those project bags are emptied, I can then move wool or yarn from the little chest into those project bags, and then bring some of the yarn from some of the stash into there and keep that process going. So I've got quite a clear process mapped out in my head. How much I'll keep to it is another matter entirely. But yeah, so that's everything to do with where I am at the moment with all my knitting and sewing and stuff. I'm hoping I'll have a lot more available to talk about next week, but so I'll move on to recommendations, which I've not done for a while. We're just coming to the climax of this series of Doctor Who. We have 2 episodes left, and much to my pleasure, for those who don't know anything about Doctor Who, it'll mean nothing, but the original Cybermen are making a reappearance, and one of the reasons I'm happy about that is that I think the original Cybermen were much less sci-fi and more possible development for humanity. In the 1960s, artificial hearts and lungs and limbs were in the early stages of development. Quite a lot of people had come back from the war, for example, with limbs missing or various other, what would have been in the past, catastrophic injuries. And places like Stoke Mandeville, with the rise of the, what were then called the Special Olympics and now called the Paralympics, had been at the forefront of helping people to develop not the same life they would have had without the injuries, obviously, but to have an equally fulfilling and complete life, to be able to move around more easily, to be able to be involved in everyday activities, or some semblance of those activities, like sport, adapted to their particular needs. And then, of course, with organ transplant, it opened up new areas of hope for those people who were suffering from serious illnesses which couldn't be treated other than by transplant, which in the past would have meant a death sentence. And I have a degree of ambivalence about organ donation. It's a very good thing to be able to do, but I'm very much on the fence about it. It's difficult to explain why. There is a degree of disquiet, is all I would put. I'm not opposed to it. I just have a degree of discomfort with it. And I would note here, this isn't a religious objection. Pope Benedict XVI was a donor card holder, although obviously in his 80s now, and so his organs wouldn't be considered necessarily suitable, although some of them may, things like corneas and the like. Although I understand that when he became Pope, the Vatican actually said that the Pope's body was no longer his own, it belonged to the Vatican, and they would decide whether or not parts of him could be dispersed, which I would guess would mean that they wouldn't. But my point being really that there is no, in principle, religious objection to organ donation in the Catholic Church. But I just have a degree of disquiet about the whole process. Having said that, Kit Pedler, who was a doctor in the 1960s and was the scriptwriter who wrote the story for Doctor Who all the way back in 1966, which introduced the Cybermen, he was also concerned about the potential for misuse of organ donation, and in particular cybernetics, of making... Cybernetics in those days wouldn't have referred to things like the internet. It was more about artificial hearts, lungs, limbs, and the like. And the body horror associated with... I'm not going to finish that thought. I'm going to go off, not quite at a tangent. There is something known as, I can't remember, the Uncanny Valley, I think it's called. It's an idea that the more like a human a robot becomes in appearance, the more difficult people find it to be around, because it has all the appearance of a human but none of the natural movements of a human. So we're quite happy with robots that have cartoonish human caricatures, if you like. So they exaggerate or accentuate an aspect of humanness, but they don't look human. And there is a group of people a large group of normal mainstream population people who react quite viscerally against what we might call androids, robots that have all the appearance of being human but don't have the emotions and the physical tics that human beings have. And this kind of robophobia manifests itself in a number of different ways. And it's been quite a popular theme within science fiction for a very long time. And I think what Kit Pedler was doing with the Cybermen was trying to have something which was almost human. They had the first Cybermen had human hands coming out of the end of metal arms, and they had what would have been human features but hidden behind a cloth mask. Whereas the later Cybermen became much more robotic, and everything was silver, and it was powerful, and it was strong, and it was much less human-like. Although at the same time, there's always been a kind of facial appearance with eyes and handles that act like ears do, and a slit mouth. So that there's been some element of human identification in the Cybermen, and I just find it interesting. That body horror is kind of it's kind of what The Walking Dead is all about. What Cybermen and zombies share is that they are human-ish but not human, and there is a real fear in some people's parts. I mean, I've always been terrified of zombies. Of all the horror genres, so mummies and vampires and Frankenstein's monster and all that kind of thing, none of those things ever bothered me, but zombies always did. And it was the fact that this human acted in a very unhuman way. Not inhuman, but unhuman. And I found that very disconcerting. And that's what frightened me. And in the same way, the original Cybermen did that, because they were almost humans but weren't. Whereas the later Cybermen were clearly robots, maybe with a human brain and central nervous system, but so what? But the early Cybermen looked like human beings. And there's just something very curious about that sense of organic but inorganic. Because one of the other curious things is that we don't feel that way about gorillas and chimpanzees and orangutans. We're actually quite impressed by these almost human creatures, because they are. We're attracted to them because they look like us. They seem to think like us. They seem to behave like us. They hold things like us. They have groups and arguments and love each other as we do. And we're not afraid of them. And I think it's the inorganic or the irrational in the case of zombies, because their brains aren't working, so they're not operating as humans. They're operating under some kind of lack of care or consideration for the other, which I don't think we've ever felt that way about primates. So it's just interesting. I don't want to read anything too significantly into it, but I'm quite enjoying the fact that the original Cybermen, in some way, shape or form, are going to reappear. I've got my own theories about why. I think it's possible that we spent a lot of time in this series on Earth with the new companion Bill, She's at university, and the Doctor is a professor at the university because he's holding the mistress, who used to be the master, in a prison cell, a vault in the bottom of the university. And I think we may discover tonight or next week that was actually Earth's twin planet Mondas, and that Bill isn't human in the sense that she's from Earth. She's a human from the twin planet Mondas, which is where the original Cybermen came from. Now, this is all science fiction, it doesn't matter. But the other important thing that's going to happen, I think, there's a question and answer session after the episode of Doctor Who tonight on Facebook Live, which is being promoted all across the world. So I think tonight we're going to find out who the next Doctor is. Don't know for certain, but I'm just intrigued that because the Christmas special has been filmed, but the regeneration scene hasn't been filmed, and the new series... Sorry, no, the Christmas special has been prepared, but it hasn't been filmed. So the regeneration scene will have to be filmed in the next 2 weeks after this season ends. So the person who is going to be the Doctor is going to appear on set in the next 4 weeks. So I think, personally, that they're going to use this opportunity at the end of Peter Capaldi's final season to announce who the new Doctor is. I may be wrong, but I wouldn't be surprised if I was right. I usually am right about everything, as you know. Anyway, for those of you not interested in Doctor Who, so what? But, I'm interested in Doctor Who, and there we go. Just a small insight into my life. So I think we'll call it a day there. I've waffled enough this afternoon. I hope you like the changes I've made, and if you have any comments or suggestions, I'm more than happy to hear them. Only polite ones, please, Bob. And I look forward to chatting with you again, hopefully next week. I don't think there's any particular reason at this stage why not next week, but who knows what's going to happen between now and then. So until then, I hope you stay well and stay happy, and I will speak to you all again soon. Goodbye.